Hello everybody, I'm looking forward to speaking to you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk as well. My name is David Hiscox. As you said, I'm a musician. I play piano, I teach piano. I am also a writer. I much prefer to write, but I understand that the spoken word is very, very important. I'm one of the founders. It was basically my idea to start the XYZ. And we started out pretty much as a conservative/libertarian blog, and we made the quite natural progression from libertarian through to nationalist. Now we do a lot of live streams on YouTube as well, but my own passion is music and writing, basically. I want to sort of my talk will be sort of three parts. The first part, I want to talk a bit about my own personal life. I don't want to make it all about me, but I think we'll all see parallels in it, because I'll talk about my own personal journey and my political formation. And you'll see how that transformation continued when I started XYZ and all the way through my time with XYZ. And then I'll talk a bit about the media, advice on anybody who wants to start their own media blog, and just where I think it's all going and why I'm actually doing this in the first place. Just on that note about why I'm doing this in the first place, having my own blog and doing all the stuff that I'm doing is not something that I really envisaged myself doing. I wanted to be a rock star. But a few years ago I realised that something just was not right, and so something had to be done, and so that's what I'm doing now. To go to my own life, I had a good childhood. I was raised out in the eastern suburbs, very leafy, in the foothills of the Dandenongs. My grandparents and great-grandparents were all in beautiful parts of Box Hill and Kew, so I've got memories of Melbourne childhood, just leafy streets, beautiful, beautiful Melbourne. I was raised in a Christian Pentecostal family. Pentecostals have a few things wrong, but a lot of things they have right as well. My life was basically sport and music and family and church. It was a beautiful life. I was raised on Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, the Bible, Star Wars. And my great-grandparents and grandparents made sure that I really had a grounding in the best of Australian culture, the best of British and Western culture. 1988 in particular, I remember, was a great year. Aside from the grand final when Melbourne got beaten by 96 points by Hawthorn, that was terrible. But it was the bicentennial year, and back then we were allowed to be proud of our country. My great-grandmother, who at that age was 91 or 92, so she extended all the way back to the 1800s. She got us tickets to go and see the tall ships, which were docked in Melbourne Port. So the tall ships had basically sailed all the way from Great Britain to Australia to reenact the passage of the First Fleet. You wouldn't be allowed to do that anymore. Apparently we're all boat people now. Yeah. But back then it was celebrated. I was raised on just colonial history, so naturally I wanted to be a bushranger when I didn't want to be a starfighter pilot. Basically we had unself-conscious nationalism. It was just normal. In primary school it was mostly Anglo-Saxon kids, but there were a few Mohammeds and Hussein Yusufs, and the Greek guy was called Jim Crummins. I thought that was funny. But we could see the starting of multiculturalism coming, and we could see the start of just the left-wing ideology being pushed in school as well. I remember they were predicting all the environmental catastrophe by 2000, because 2000 seemed like that crazy number that it seemed far off but still close enough. And I remember our teacher saying every second, a football field is destroyed from the Amazon, but last I checked, it's still there. So then, in high school, it was a very clear cut from the 80s to the 90s. So the Cold War had ended. One of my first real little red pills into the idea that culture can change just like that. Everybody's tastes and aesthetics can change just like that was the change from 80s music, which, if I generalize, is very major key, positive. It was like, I like to make the argument that 80s music won the Cold War. It presented the West as being this great place, which was just lots of fun. If you look at old Van Halen concerts, for example, they're just amazing. And then just like that, it went to grunge, which basically the music went from, it's like the technical and recording quality went down like that as well. It's like everything just got turned on its head. So it's my first indication that someone behind the scenes perhaps has said, right, we're going to make a very deliberate change in what we want people to like. And I saw everybody go along with it as well, apart from a few musicians and a few independent people. Everybody just seemed to think grunge was the new thing. And Def Leppard was, like, even though it was a couple of years ago, it was like an old band, basically. I also got to see the political correctness sort of start to come in, but in about 1995, all of a sudden the football show came on with Sam Newman and all the footballers just making just old school jokes. And all of a sudden it was like that was a breath of fresh air. And that was 1995. And so that was an indication at a young age in my formative years that we can get told one thing, for example, we can get told political correctness is the future, progressivism is the future. But then you have these guys coming back and just being themselves, just being blokes, just being masculine, being just larrikins, and it exploded. And so that was a real indication that, basically this idea that progressivism is the future, that's a lie. And people will just instinctively go to what they see as normal and natural and just stirs something in them. And that's what the footy show did. I thought it was great. So then I got to university and the progressivism, the liberalism got turned up to the max. I did music, but I did history and politics as well. In every subject, there was always feminism involved in every class. Feminism in music was a really interesting one in particular. Music feminists argued that not only, like, they didn't just look at the fact that all the great composers in history, Western history, were men. Like, we would look at that and go, well, that just proves that us blokes were the best. But they looked at it, first they said, well, first of all, that's terrible. Secondly, they're all white men, so we have to start investigating music cultures of all the other countries in the world. I tried very hard to like music cultures of the other parts of the world. I've tried very hard for years to like microtones. It's rubbish. Awful. They then went a step further and they claimed that all the female composers, first of all, they were ignored and they were told they had to make babies. And they had to put their family first, and so they never had the recognition that they deserved. Also, they wrote in a style that was masculine. So the feminists described music, the way that blokes write it, as it always builds very directly to a climax, and then it stops either at a certain mathematical point afterwards, or it just builds to the climax and that's it. And then they said, well, the way that, if you look at the way females like to write music, it sort of undulates and doesn't really go very far, and there's a really... You get what I'm talking about. So that was a great little red pill. So at the end of the day, I realised, all of these intellectual constructs, and I find it really interesting what you were talking about there, Richard, as well, because it relates. It's like they have all these intellectual constructs to basically defend their desire to be selfish. At the end of the day, all these works, all these books, all this so-called amazing scholarship was basically there to mask the fact that their whole point was that they're obsessed with genitalia and what comes out of them. That's basically all it is. And if you look at their approach to architecture, it's exactly the same. The critique of skyscrapers, for example, is genitalia. When you look at female architecture, they're making caves. It's just yeah. So that was again another red pill. At the same time, I met a girl, a very pretty girl, and like what was his name? I've forgotten his name already.
Shelley.
I wanted to do what I wanted. And so I rejected Christianity, I rejected the church. In doing so, I rejected my family as well. And I came up with a lot of pseudo-intellectual reasons why I rejected it all. But at the end of the day, it was basically because I wanted to satisfy my own base urges. And like a lot of blokes who get red-pilled, the girl that I was in love with turned out to be quite crazy, was quite abusive. And so once I got dumped in future years, that was one of the things that red-pilled me again, just the way that the issue of domestic violence, for example, is just, the approach to domestic violence is actually gendered, which is quite ironic. There's no actual acknowledgement of domestic violence against men. And so that was one of the ways that I actually started to argue with people online. It was kind of my first taste of it, because I got onto a website called Online Opinion Australia, and there was just a community of guys who'd sort of been red-pilled on that aspect, and we would just argue with all the feminists, and so that was kind of how I cut my teeth there. Also, so basically in my 20s, I'd gone from this really warm, it wasn't perfect. I got bullied at school, there were family issues, all that sort of stuff. But just a real family Christian environment where I had a real community and I was surrounded by love. To my 20s, where I'd rejected all of that because a lot of it had to do with my own selfishness. And then I was quite happy to go along with liberal arguments to justify what I'd done. Also, my family, my parents divorced, and so they broke up. It's like the whole family splintered. So it's like I had become isolated. We'd all become isolated from each other. And so I had to basically learn how to be a man. So I spent a lot of time in the dumps, but then pulled myself out of it. I played in some really cool bands, but I worked with a lot of manipulative people, so I had to learn to stand up for myself. And so in the midst of all of that, Facebook came along. And so this is where I'm sort of leading to the start of the XYZ, but there's still another little tangent I want to go through first. So Facebook was amazing because for the first time we had a technology where everybody could be on the one platform all talking to each other. At first, it started off basically, I think, with people of my own generation. We were basically just sharing our drunken party photos. And then our parents got onto it, boomers got onto it. And at first I didn't want to be friends with my boomer parents because I'm like, I don't want you to see all my drunken photos. But eventually it was just a phenomenon that spread across society. We were able to catch up with people we hadn't seen in a decade. But I started to see on my Facebook feed a recreation of what I saw in my own life, which was like, yes, there'd be cat videos, there'd be drunken party photos, but it started to become really, really consistent. Just left-wing views. People would share videos like promoting left-wing ideas and all that sort of stuff. And so when I had disagreed with my friends in my 20s, I was always finding myself outnumbered because I was a musician in Melbourne, so naturally I'm surrounded by lefties. And so I would be made to feel that I was on the fringe. I was very much in the minority. I was very, very much being left behind by history. But when I was able to take them on Facebook, because I'm a good writer, I was able to hold my own. So let me just go on another little tangent before I come back to this Facebook thing, because Facebook is actually essential. It's just to lead where I'm going with this. It's like we're able to weaponize Facebook against the system. So the other tangent that I need to go on is that even despite all these red pills, I met a Chilean communist girl, very pretty, and I went out with her for quite a few years. So I still believed that I could be like in a serious relationship with a communist and a foreigner. And there were so many different stories, but to sum up a few, in my visits to Chile, I went to actual communist rallies where they would wave communist flags. These people live in 1973. They see the Pinochet crackdown is just the worst thing that ever happened, and they've been telling the story of it ever since, and retelling the story, and it controls everything that they do. There's a big Chilean communist community here in Australia, and you had people come across from Chile talking about how they want to extradite people back to Chile, and they said this. They said, "Don't let them have a peaceful death." They didn't want people to get away with the stuff that they were talking about. Naturally, I've always wanted to fill in gaps in my own historical knowledge, so I had to find out about it. And I found out that basically the communists in Chile, they were prepared to let hundreds of thousands, if not a million Chileans, starve, die to achieve communism. They put through land reforms, which basically meant that the country was within months of famine. They used up their gold reserves. Pinochet coming in, killed a few thousand communists, but it was basically essentially the same thing as what happened in the Spanish Civil War. Franco basically stopped the communists from destroying the country. So, I'm in a relationship with somebody where it's like that, and I've seen what happened in Chile, and I've seen it gave me an insight into the fact that when the right has responded to the left basically trying to destroy a country, the left will tell the story about what happened, for the decades afterwards. And so you can do it once, but then they're just going to keep dragging you back, because that's what they're trying to do over there in Chile as well. So I was becoming aware of that. What's also really interesting though was that these people, they were always surrounded by family. They would have meals with everybody around a big table of food, and they would just all stay around that table for hours and hours and hours. I'll get bored, but they would just eat and drink and just keep going. And they would say to me, "Oh, you white people, you don't have a family culture like we do." And I'd be like, "Well, we used to. I remember my childhood." And they say, you white people, you don't have a culture. And I'm like, we used to. I remember bush rangers, the tall ships, Chopin. I remember just being surrounded by the best of Western culture when I was a kid. And it's like all of a sudden that had just been cut off. And in the last 20 years, we've had all these people come in to the country, and we're not allowed to assert our own culture. And they assert their own culture instead, and we've lost it just like that. So I realised that I was becoming completely estranged from my own culture and who I was. And then I saw when Tony Abbott got elected as head of the Liberal Party, I saw what was going on basically in Australia, because I've been a big supporter of John Howard, and I thought that when the Liberal Party came back, there would just be a natural swing. And I thought there would always be a natural swing between Liberal and Labor in Australia. I thought that our culture was strong enough. I thought that the ideas of the free market were strong enough. The Liberal Party would come in, pay off the debt, get the economy going. Then there'd be another change in 10 years. Everybody would want a little bit of Labor. Remember, oh yeah, they're terrible. And then go back to the Liberal Party. I thought it would always be a swing. But I saw that something was different this time around. I saw that the country had changed. I saw that the Liberal Party had changed. They weren't able to get through economic reforms. I saw that the ABC was relentless. I saw that the ABC was basically $1 billion a year funded organisation, skewing the media landscape in Australia. And basically they had $1 billion every year of our money to basically push left-wing ideas. And so I'm like, well, somebody's got to do something about this. So then we come back to Facebook, because the thing about Facebook is over the years I gathered together just a handful of friends, and then friends of friends and friends of friends of friends. And so we got to the point where whenever any of us would start up an argument with one of our lefty friends, rather than us being outnumbered by all their lefty friends, now we would all jump in on them and outnumber them, and we turned the tables on them, which is great. And so it was basically in this mix where I realised, right, we've actually got something here. We've got some really intelligent people from a broad range of ideas. Like, we've got a few of us libertarians, a few of us are Christians. I was into Ayn Rand at that stage. I'm like, let's start something. We can actually make something of this. Like, we basically write essays as our responses to our friends. Let's just make a blog, write these essays and put them out into the whole of Australia. So that's basically how XYZ started. So we're all arguing with it all the time anyway. We're all spending all this time on social media anyway. Let's start up a company. So we started up, we came up with the name XYZ because if you lay out the alphabet from left to right, ABC is on the far left, and XYZ, as Maddie and I like to say on the live streams, is on the far right. And that's basically how it started. So we just started, we set up a website, we just started writing articles. We were basically doing propaganda for the Liberal Party at that stage. I had read just recently about the Islamic conquest of the Western world and understand just how fast we basically lost some of the major centres of Christendom, so I was very aware of Islam. And so we very quickly moved to talking about Islam and the threat of Islam and the threat of demographic replacement by Islam, while at the same time sort of pushing forward libertarian ideas. So we're at a situation where it's like, for me, my intellectual political formation is still a little bit contradictory, but it was starting to come together. I was aware of the threat of demographic change, of demographic replacement. I was aware of the fact that the economic system that we had and the political system that we had was not working for us, because through Ayn Rand, despite some of the degeneracy, I was able to understand that in a democracy, by definition, you're going to have 50% of the population who are below average and would like a little bit of what the above average 50% want. And of that above average 50%, there's going to be a certain segment of them who see it as in their interests to appeal to the people who are below 50%. So democracy is always basically going to steal the wealth of the people. So I was on my path to understanding that democracy is basically socialism. We had some ups and downs, and then Brexit became a big deal. We pushed quite hard on social media during Brexit. We got a fair bit of following, and after Brexit happened, Andrew Bolt shared our blog because some of the people involved in XYZ knew him, to give us a favour, and that basically that was our first real sort of entry. And so at that point, a lot of new contributors came along, and they started a bit of that political movement. So then 2016, as we all know, that was a really big year. That's when the political earthquakes happened. We had Paul Hanson made a return to the Australian Parliament, and the big one was Donald Trump. And so the election of Donald Trump, it was a real game changer for myself and quite a number of the other bloggers on XYZ, because aside from the fact that it showed us that the entire mainstream media and the whole political system is rigged against people who basically want their country back. Well, basically, their whole point was to lie to us. So it opened our eyes, it really did that. But it also opened us up to just thinking, well, if this can happen, if a man who comes onto the stage and makes anti-immigrant rhetoric great again, basically bases his whole entire political strategy on basically stopping immigration, stopping illegal immigration, all these things that we've all been told will alienate everybody. What else is wrong? And so from there, once Donald Trump was elected, it's like that's when a whole bunch of red pills just started just falling into place for myself and a whole bunch of the other miners at XYZ. So, I think some of these red pills. So my approach to Islam changed. So rather than going, okay, well, Islam is an anti-liberal political ideology which oppresses women and oppresses homosexuals, and said, okay, I oppose Islam because it's the political ideology of the foreign invaders who are coming to our country. And in many respects, like the reason why they're so virile is because they actually have a system based more on natural order, and they actually have a good concept of masculinity, of patriarchy, and like we're not going to convert to Islam to get that back, but we're going to make Christianity like it was like maybe 100 years ago when we were actually more like that. I'll just finish this little bit and then we'll have lunch. Just the understanding that the Liberal Party was basically treacherous to ourselves. John Howard stopped votes, but he brought in Europe. The understanding, okay, democracy is not working, democracy is socialism. We've been lied to about like the idea that democracy is the best political system, apart from all the others. It's a terrible political system. The idea, like building on the Islam thing, understanding that it's not just the democratic replacement that we possibly face from Islam. If anything, that's like actually the least of their demographic worries. We've got far more people coming in from India and China. They might be quiet, hard working, but if they replace us, it's still a terrible thing. We might be getting replaced by people who just the purest people who clean the air with their farts. If they replace us, it's a terrible thing. My approach to my family and to Christianity changed as well, because I really started to understand that my opposition to Christianity was based on my own selfish desires and the lies that I've been told about Christianity. All my opposition to it had been framed by just everything that I've been taught for the last 20 years. And so when I started to doubt everything I've been taught for the last 20 years, or really doubt, then I realised, wait, Christianity is actually got a point. And I broke up with my girlfriend, and I started to see that I'd lived a life where I saw the consequences of living a life without God. And so I came back to that, and I've been able to come back to my family as well, because I realised that I was poisoned against my family, as well as basically separating myself, again, through my own selfishness. So maybe just to wrap that up, like I find it really interesting. I'm really glad that you summarised the life of Sheldon, because when I think of the life of Marx and Rousseau, I've heard as well, the consistent thing that I find with all these liberals, these Marxists, cultural Marxists, whatever you want to call them, is that they're very selfish. They tend to scab off their parents, and they construct these ideological constructs to justify their own selfishness. Cool. I'll do the second half after. Okay, thanks to people who came up and had lunch and said they related to that. I didn't mean it to be a testimonial, but I guess it was a little bit of that. I'll have people raising their hands either in salutes or praising God in this was okay, so this is where we get to just the real work that we've done at XYZ over the last year and a half, and we get to the edgier part of it as well. When I have met a few people sort of in the alt media, particularly the Unshackled guys when I first met them, their response was like this: "Oh, you're a little edgier than us." Dead set, that's what they do. So this is where we get to the edgier stuff. So when I was a kid, like all normal young boys, I thought war was really, really cool. And I spent hours of my life in grade 6 playing a Battle of the Britain flight simulator and shooting down Messerschmitts. I also got to fly the Messerschmitts too, and Hurricanes were useless. From there, I basically learned everything that I could about the Battle of Britain. And then I wanted to know everything I could about World War II, then about World War I. Yes?
Can you just move the microphone a bit more to the front?
Right here?
Yeah. Just around there to point at you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Everything in between, and then basically my desire to fill in the gaps in my historical knowledge started very early. That brings us to 2017, when all these barriers in my mind had come down after Trump had been elected, and I realised that nationalism was a good thing and it was something that actually appealed to people. And so I had spent a good couple of years really re-examining what happened in World War II, and I couldn't get around the fact that the Soviet Union, Communist China was the worst, most genocidal regime in the 20th century. And the Soviet Union was the second worst genocidal regime in the 20th century. In the Soviet Union, they had killed more people than the National Socialists of Germany are said to have killed. And they did that before we went to war against the National Socialists and allied with the Soviet Union. So that doesn't mean that National Socialism was a good thing. It doesn't mean that the Holocaust didn't happen, but it changes the whole way that we interpret World War II. We went to war allied with what was then the worst regime in history, and we see it as a victory. That regime, if you look at Operation Barbarossa, you look at the fact that the Germans captured all this Soviet equipment on the first few days. Why did they capture all this Soviet equipment? Because it was on the border, it was ready to invade. Stalin's whole plan was to invade Europe. I'm not saying we should thank Adolf Hitler, but it was essentially immoral to go to war with the Soviet Union. And so we look at the way that the story that we're told about World War II now. And for years, it was great. We were told, okay, the democracies, we've won. It was a really great thing. Our grandparents, our great-grandparents fought for freedom, they fought for us. And at least in the 1980s, at least I was able to get that grounding. That's not what we're told now. Now it's all Nazis, Nazis, Nazis. Holocaust, Holocaust, Holocaust. Everybody knows that 6 million Jews are believed to have died in the Holocaust. But how many people know how many Australians died in World War II? How many people know how many British died? How many people know how many Germans and Russians died? We focus on, the entire focus is on that rather than the Europeans. So this isn't to do any kind of revisionism. This isn't to say we fought on the wrong side. This is simply to say, look at the way that the story of World War II has shaped how we now live. Basically, anytime anybody in a European country says, we want to stop immigration, we want to have our own country, the Holocaust is used as the weapon for liberalism, to push all these liberal ideas. It's the shutdown. It's the ultimate shutdown is to be called a Nazi. And so, for that reason, once this red pill happens, for me, on XYZ, I allowed discussion of the JQ. And if you thought that the XYZ was a place for free and open debate before that. You should have seen it after it. Because it went crazy. So we had boomer conservatives, we had all the people from the alt-right coming on board, we had libertarians coming in, we had a lot of Jews who were very concerned about what we were saying as well. It's like everything just went absolutely crazy on the Facebook pages and on our own side as well. And so when I started XYZ, I hoped it would be a place to, just for everybody who was basically opposed to the left, to have discussions. We well and truly had a discussion. Eventually I got to the point where I'm like, right, well, if we want to actually achieve something, rather than just having this god-awful fight amongst ourselves, we'll just go more nationalist. So that's what we are now. The core writers are nationalists. Somebody like David Hilton, he focuses on Christianity a lot. Someone like Adam Piggott focuses more on nationalism. Everybody's kind of got their approach, but we've basically got the broad aim of taking back our country. We have sort of people who are a little bit more normie-con every now and then will write for us. Some people have asked us to take down their stuff, take down their material from the page, and I completely respect that, because I understand that we had a site which was basically a really good conservative site, and we went through a transformation. And so not everybody's going to be prepared to go through that transformation. We're not Nazis, and we're not saying it's all Jews, but we talk about that sort of stuff. So that's basically what happened from 2017 to mid 2018. Imagine that kind of story. We've been through quite a tumult, and then Fraser Anning comes along. So I had been in contact with a guy from Fraser Anning's office for a few months because Fraser Anning had been going along to rallies, marches for South African farmers and all this sort of stuff. And we basically got to the point where he would feed us stuff, we would put up a piece about Fraser Anning, and we could share their photos and all that sort of stuff. It's fantastic. And then I get a call on the morning that Fraser Anning is doing his speech, his maiden speech to Parliament, and I get told, okay, this is what he's going to say. So I understand straight away, right, this goes to the heart of nationalism. He's giving a speech which is basically going to red pill Australia on the way that the Holocaust is used as a ransom over all of us. And this is going to go ballistic. Interestingly, the very next day I received a really, really well-written article, basically explaining the whole thing that I've just been talking about here, just the fact that we're not allowed to have our own nations because apparently, even though our great-grandparents fought against the Nazis, because we're white, we're all Nazis. And it seems a little suspicious, but that's all I'll say on that. It's just whether they actually slipped that line about the final solution for the immigration problem, or whether it was just using two words in the English language, I don't know. But it was just one of the most amazing red pills I've ever seen. From there, the next few months we were basically shilling for Fraser Anning, but I understood, okay, this isn't about XYZ, this isn't about Fraser Anning, this is just about finding ways to get nationalism seeded in the Australian consciousness. And just the nationalist message just spread as far and wide as possible. It's like we had a sort of two-tier kind of way of getting information out to everybody. Like on XYZ, as I said, we were able to weaponize Facebook. Like there are Facebook groups which had thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of people, and you would share an article on that, and it could go pretty big. And then you had some of the major activists like Blair Cottrell, Neil Erickson, who would share our stuff. Milo shared our stuff one time. And whenever that happened, we would have a big spike. When Fraser Anning came along, that went into overdrive because he got over 100,000 people on his Facebook page very, very quickly. And so when he shared our stuff, it would just go to listings. So it was great. These sort of top tier people who were actually allowed to be covered by the mainstream media, they could expand our audience and they could use us to speak to their constituencies as well. And so that all basically came to its climax in the election. And after that, Fraser Anning was gone. The political party basically disappeared. And the Facebook censorship, the YouTube censorship has just come down really, really hard. From there, like XYZ's views have basically halved, but from here it's just a matter of following where some of the audience goes, working with other people, making sure we all share our content and all that sort of stuff. So I'm not particularly worried about that. What I think is really, really interesting is that we had this amazing window from about 2015 to basically, at least here in Australia, from about 2015 to halfway through this year, where we had a way of getting a nationalist message, a traditionalist message, a message that opposes global homo, cultural Marxism, liberalism. We had a way of basically spreading that to a lot of people, and we were able to weaponize a system that the people in charge thought that they could use against us. Now they've basically just like, and this is an important thing, we didn't just gradually lose audience because we put people off by what we said. Yes, we would have people saying unsubscribe, I can't believe what you're saying, I'm never reading you guys again. We would get them from time to time. But our audience numbers would go like that. What has happened, and this is across the board, is that they have shut down the main feeders, like the main pages, like whether it's Blair Cottrell, Neil Erickson's page, other pages, but they no longer exist. They just took them down, and they used hate speech. They used Charlottesville and they used Auckland as pretext to say, you guys are spreading hate speech, you guys are possibly inciting violence. And then with the rest of us pages, they gradually sort of tightened the censorship on our Facebook pages. And so you look at the XYZ Facebook page now, and it's like the likes for most articles will be in the single figures. We've got 13,000 followers, but single figure likes. That's happened because of censorship. You look at a page like Cauldron Pool, who are also, like, they talk about basically Christian stuff. They don't go anywhere near what we talk about. You look to mid-October and they were getting hundreds of likes on their page, and all of a sudden, bang, just like that. They've just gone down as well. So, yeah, the point I make here is that it had nothing to do with like having a message that put people off. If anything, we're actually desensitizing people to the stigma of being called racist. We're basically normalizing the idea that it is okay to oppose immigration and it is okay to demand that we have our own ethno-state with a majority white population. That idea, not only were we normalizing it, we were seeing people just energized by it. Like, it's what I found in my own self. It's the thing that basically gives me the energy to write and put stuff up every single day. It's like I've connected to a part of myself which I've been forced to deny for my whole life. That's why I spent the first half of this talk sort of talking about myself. You reconnect to that and you have an explosion. And you give people the breadcrumbs to the truth, and it's like they just follow that rabbit hole and they come to a place like this like with their ideas fully formed. And that's, for me, that's like a really that's basically the system. That's how it works. I look now on those previous 4 years as that was an amazing opportunity, and I don't expect it to come around again. But that's not really the point. Like, the point is that I was able to have a blog which was able to be part of that fight to get that message out to everybody. And so now we've got a community, like we've seen a big increase in the number of people who want to join up with all of the different organisations which are basically out there saying, look, there's something wrong with our country, we've got to take our countries back. And all those people who've like seen all those YouTube videos, which are getting deleted, everybody who's been like following those pages where like they've had their page just taken down, all that sort of stuff, they're still out there. And they're going to, they're red pill now. And so it's only a matter of time before they all come back together. That's basically summarising where we are now. We've had this situation where we had this extraordinary access to a mass of people. And I'm amazed that Facebook and YouTube and Mark Zuckerberg and all those people, that they allowed us to actually have that access to them for so long. Where we are now then, it's great. We're doing live streams, myself and Maddie's Modern Life. We're doing live streams with guys from the from the Unshackled, and that's the thing called the Uncuckables. And through, I like the name. I wrote a piece shilling for praise right now called King Annie the Uncuckable, and they shared it on their page. And that was huge. That was after the St Kilda rally. That was a lot of fun. I sort of okay, let's run with that. And through that, we've basically made connections to all the different, whole bunch of different independent YouTubers. Some of them are civic nationalists, some of them are more Christians. Like some of them are Proud Boys, they're more civ nat. Then there's like Dia Beltran, who's like, she's amazing, like there's always drama, but because she wants to be, because she wants to know everybody, like she's been able to connect us to everybody. It's incredible. The way I see it is everybody has a role to play. Like I see someone like Tim Wilms at the Unshackled, and he's very gossipy, but it's great because then he knows all these different people and you know who to connect to. You see somebody like the Dusty Bogan, who's like civ nat. I see him in the same way that I see Ryan Fletcher, who writes for us. He does all these really edgy cartoons, but they're both very ochre. They're both very. They haven't had the university education that I have, but they have a way of just getting right to the truth and speaking it really plainly without any pretense. You've got somebody like David Hilton, who I consider to be like the smartest and bravest guy that I've ever known. Like he's just gone to places that I could never imagine that I would write about. What's really important for me is that, like, when I started off XYZ, I had no idea that like a nationalist community even existed. And like over the last 4 years, I've been able to find out about all the different organisations, who everybody is, what all of their history is, and all that sort of stuff. It also makes you think, how did I not know about any of this? And so from there, the challenge is to keep getting the message out, because we've only been able to get the message out in the last few years. Well, no, that's not true. That's only from my perspective. In terms of what the XYZ does with all the other alt media organisations, I see the best thing to do is to basically amalgamate with all other organisations. It seems the best way to like just get the best balance of scale. Just get rid of some double handling, all that sort of stuff. But I don't think we should all form into one organisation, because working with conservatives is like trying to herd cats. But basically, I'm like, okay, well, we're all working together, all getting to know each other, all of our suspicions about each other are all sort of dying down. Let's just all work together, work in the same studios. Basically, we've got a whole bunch of people now who have quite a few years of experience and quite a few years of sort of getting messages across to an audience, and so we've got the foundation of a real industry. What we've got to consider though, and this is, I'll bring this to the conclusion. I don't think the alt media in Australia is going to become some giant megalith which is going to challenge the big mainstream media organisations. I don't think we're going to actually I don't think we're going to be able to sell the ABC. I don't think we're going to be able to destroy the ABC. The point of what we do is to connect people to each other. We're part of the network. We're part of, we've served our purpose in getting a nationalist message out to a lot of mainstream Australia. From here, it's about, okay, this is one of the ways that we basically build our army. As in, this is how we build the bunch of people who, if something happens, we're the people who we can turn to. We've had discussion in the previous talks about what happened, the possibilities of civilizational collapse. And there are multiple ways that can happen. At the moment, we've got a housing market which is massively overinflated, and we're just waiting for a housing crash. We've got a debt bubble. David Hilton likes to talk about the grand solar minimum coming along. I started looking into that, and then I got into polar flips, and I'm like, okay, that's just a whole other kettle of fish. We can look simply at, there's the footage just the last few days of, in London, there is a white middle-class socialist Extinction Rebellion activist prancing around on top of a train, and the crowd actually pulled him off. But you look at the crowd, and that crowd is actually quite multicultural. The point here is that the left have brought in, through mass immigration, all these people who have not been subject to the mind control that our fellow white people have for the last few decades. So when they see somebody like that prancing up on a train, they're going to grab them off. If there's a bunch of white guys, they might grab him, maybe in another few years when they get angry. But at the moment, we've all been trained not to do that. But the point I make here is that in bringing in people from, so many people from other countries, hundreds of thousands, millions of them, they're bringing in a culture which is going to challenge the current cultural Marxist culture. At the moment, we don't have a country anymore. Australia's not a country. We're basically just a collection of people living in a country. We've got the remnants of what used to be Australia, and we're very gradually being replaced. The dominant culture is now cultural Marxism, but that's not going to be able to sustain itself. And the people coming in, they haven't been programmed like we have. And so there's going to be a conflict, there's going to be confrontation between this new culture and the dominant cultural Marxist culture. So, at least in Australia, there are all these possibilities of just some kind of collapse, some kind of chaos that's going to be caused. And so that's why it's important to have organisations like this and a number of the other organisations that I see. It's because we're the people that we turn to when something like that happens. That's why it's important for us to think small, to think about moving to a country where we're surrounded by more of our own people. Because say when the electricity goes out, when the water goes out, when we can't use refrigeration anymore, we rely on people who look like us. We're the ones who we're going to rely on. So that's basically where I'm going with this. I never would have started XYZ if I thought that, as I said at the start, if I thought there was just going to be a natural swing from left to right, I never would have started XYZ. If I thought that where we're going at the moment wasn't heading to some kind of crisis point, I wouldn't have started either. I look at so many aspects of our civilization and I see that we're unsustainable. So I think that it's important that we train ourselves to be ready for it, and that we work together to get ready for it. That's basically it. Thanks very much.